Hey folks, Moose Peterson here. Want to talk about one of my favorite lenses, the 200 f2. I mean, look at that front element, 122 millimeters of sexy glass. Right off the bat, it's a must-have. But down to practicalities, it's a 200 millimeter f2. What's that mean? You have depth of field that's from about corner of the eye to the end of the eyelash. Very narrow depth of field. That isolating ability makes it a great lens. Now the practicalities of the lens. First of all, if you notice, no tripod. Handheld. That's how I use this lens majority of the time. Because of that, the tripod collar, and if you notice I have the Really Right Stuff foot, so it's a very short profile. That is brought to the top of the lens barrel, so I have a clean surface, nothing protruding out, which to rest the lens in my hand. Now it comes to the settings. Not much different from the 600. Okay, I have it set to MA, which means I can manually focus while in autofocus mode. I have the focus eliminator set to full. The vibration, again, set to normal. Active is for when, for example, I am physically moving and this is moving and the subject is moving. When all those are playing and moving, you want to set to active. When you physically, okay, are just panning, subject's moving, you want to set to normal. Last thing on here is the memory recall. The feature I don't use. I explained it on the 600 VR video. If you want to check that out, head there. Now a couple things about this lens. First of all, if you notice the shade, it's not perfectly round. It is metal. It is not carbon fiber like many of the other shades. So because of that, it does tend to get a little bent up. What I do is simply take it off and I roll it on a flat piece of wood and just simply roll it back and forth and it pops right back into shape. The other thing is the VR for this lens is a ring that's right up here. The VR is always turned on. Now the 200 f2 VR lens, one of the second generation of VR technology, you can use the lens in VR mode whether you're hand holding or in the tripod. You do not have to turn the VR off. Very cool feature for someone who's brain dead like me, because I forget to turn it off a lot of times if I had to when I put it on the tripod. Last thing about this lens, I'm always going to be using, and I always have in my pocket, the TC17E 1.7 teleconverter. Gives me basically a 300 2.8 lens out of this. Killer combination. The other thing that is on here is the drop-in filter. It takes a very special polarizer. It does not take the typical drop-in polarizer you use for the 200 400 or 600 or 400 2.8 VRs, for example. Has its own filter drawer that pops out. I have in there just a standard NC clear glass filter. Last very important thing I want to talk about. If you notice, I'm not holding this by the camera body. I'm holding it strictly by the lens. A lot of photographers I've noticed tend to have this big bulk, attach this thing, and then they carry by the camera. What happens over time is the lens mount, okay, and keep in mind that lens mount is no more than a very small piece of brass held on by 4 or 5 screws, and this tends to get warped, gets pulled out the top. You'll start seeing very funky little focus problems. A lot of times it's because this lens is allowed to dangle off of here, and that causes it to get warped and bent out of shape. So if you're going to mount this to a tripod, you attach it here. If you're going to carry it around, you don't carry it around by the camera body. Bad. Hold the lens. Last thing, this sounds weird, but when I'm traveling on the road, this is one of my barbells. This is what I use to lift weights when I'm on the road. It ain't light. It's about 4 pounds. Does a great job. 200 f2 VR lens. Beautiful lens. Hope this helps.